Okay, thumbs up. I think we're live. So welcome. Thank you for tuning in today. So this is Hyperbarics Plus, and Prevail Over Cancer, Thursday morning seminar. And so today we're going to be talking about mast cell and glutamate and actually autoimmune disease, MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome, and cancer. And matter of fact, even I'll throw in attention deficit issues. So many different health challenges can occur from elevated glutamate and histamine levels. So I'm Keith Bishop with Prevail Over Cancer, and today we have Tony with us. So Paul is not able to make it, so Tony is sitting in, and he's an associate here at Hyperbaric Plus. And so he's got an interesting story. He started coming here to feel better, and had some remarkable results occur with that. And so he's now an associate here, and so he's helping people in their health challenges. So this glutamate issue, glutamate is an amino acid that is found and comes from protein. So if you eat any type of protein, plant or animal, most of it we have to have protein. We're going to be exposed to that, but that can, in certain people and with certain nutrient deficiencies that we're going to go into later, those can become issues for some people and creating a mast cell activation, elevating histamine. Histamine is an irritant and a driver for cancer. So that's one reason why we put that all together. And that's not counting autoimmune disease. So matter of fact, I've always known and seen with my clients, whenever we have a health challenge and we make some basic changes and the same type of changes, we go with a healthier food program, correct the gut issues, and autoimmune things get better, mast cell challenges get better, cancer items get better, immune system responses, allergies get better, so many different things. So, but I'd like Tony to introduce himself and tell us a little about your story and the challenges you had, and what made you come here, and then what happened?
Yeah, so backstory for me was 15-year chronic health issues, discovered through my naturopath in Tulsa that the root cause was Lyme disease. With Lyme disease, the primary word is just inconsistency. All the symptoms can turn on and off, and just lots of inconsistencies, and there's literally dozens of different symptoms that can happen. And came up here, started getting relief with the hyperbarics, and then was able to help with the neurofeedback program because cognitive health is such a vital part of Lyme disease. And my background, I had a background in psychology and in health coaching, and 25 years worth of research in eating clean and holistic health. So it was easy for me to step in and start helping other folks with neurofeedback. But one of the things that's very common with Lyme disease is mast cell issues, mast cell activation syndrome. So at one point I was having lots of erratic symptoms and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I read about how common MCAS was with Lyme disease. And I was like, I feel like this could be part of my problem. So first thing I did was eliminate all high histamine foods. And ironically, Keith, I thought I was eating really clean. I was eating lots of avocados, lots of green tea, lots of meal prep with clean food. And I discovered that 80–90% of my diet was high histamine foods. So when I removed that, I instantly got some relief and I knew I was onto something. But ultimately what I did was I went through about a 3-month process, and I started off with a 10-day fast, master cleanse fast. I've got about 15 years experience in doing fasting. So that was my first response to kind of activate what I call healing mode in my body and get my body, pointed back in the right direction. And then I added quercetin and antihistamines. I started using those before every meal. And then I started using the principles of an elimination diet. I added in high histamine foods one at a time so that I could figure out specifically what the triggers were. Tomatoes were a big trigger for me, and I could actually eat a raw tomato and it wasn't a trigger. But when the tomatoes were cooked, it was a massive trigger.
Right.
And so that was one of the things I had to really avoid. But I was able in about 3 months to really recover and discover which high histamine foods my body can tolerate and which ones I need to avoid permanently but I felt like I was completely able to recover and no longer have any major issues related to mast cell.
So what were the main symptoms that you were having, some of those major problems?
Really, it was very erratic. I felt like my whole body and brain was going haywire. I'd have different things turn on, but it could be anything from shooting pain, high inflammation, all the way up to brain health. I just felt dizzy, disoriented, like something was really wrong, with my brain. Some histamine response as far as sneezing and just like an allergy type feeling, but that was pretty secondary to the just random haywire type feelings that I felt in my body and brain.
Okay. So, matter of fact, I have a history of rheumatoid arthritis, different type things. And still, there are certain groups of foods I can eat, and I can have some weird, achy, burning sensations, weird spots in my body. And it's just really weird. So, whether it be a underlying Lyme, autoimmune, I test negative for autoimmune now. And so my rheumatoid factor is 0 now, where it was positive. And but when I did remove a few foods, like for me, dairy and wheat products and most grains, literally within a month, I felt so much better. It was amazing, how I felt with that.
Yeah, and I think that's really common. I know it is for people that suffer with Lyme disease. I too had many symptoms that were related to autoimmune, but always tested negative for it. Yet I get burning, stabbing pains in my face, even my brain, just those inconsistent, random shooting pains, burning sensation, numbness, tingling, and whether that's Lyme or mast cell or those are connected, I can definitely relate to all of that.
Yeah. So on the hyperbaric and Lyme, so what's your take on that, on how that played in your health?
I believe it's one just essential part to a holistic protocol to get the body healing again. For us, we have here 3 different protocols. We have what we call our standard 52-foot dive, which I say is for general health, stem cell mobilization. The next one is about equivalent to a 75-foot dive, which is part of our cancer protocol. And then Lyme disease, we have a 100-foot protocol. So in layman's terms, I like to explain that just shows that Lyme is even more challenging to attack than cancer, because we have to go to a greater depth to really move the needle with Lyme disease. But for me, the results were profound. When I first walked in here, I felt like a zombie. My body was not functioning. My brain especially was not functioning. I knew that if I went the standard medical route, which I had given up on a number of years back, that they'd probably diagnose me with early Alzheimer's, be based on the symptoms. And it's because my brain was just not working, had memory issues. And so when I first went into the hyperbaric chamber, I instantly got relief. I could tell that something happened there. For about 3 or 4 weeks, I just did the standard 52-foot. And then when I first did the Lyme 100-foot dive, I needed to go home and sleep. I could tell my body was detoxing. And fatigue and sleep is a very common symptom with Lyme. But what was unusual is I knew instantly that I was getting better sleep. And so even though I required a lot of sleep, I felt like my body was detoxing, like there was signs of improvement, that my sleep was better quality and that I was improving. I've now got about 7 months of treatment here with the hyperbaric chamber. And it took me about 3 months to where I would say I was in remission and I was able to remove all symptoms. Now if I deal with flare-ups, I know how to do it. I know how to get into the chamber. I know how to treat it. And I can instantly move the needle instead of trending the wrong way. I can start, improving and activating again what I call healing mode within my own body. I can feel my body healing. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, the healing aspect. We were talking about that earlier too, the healing. So evidently you're in several support groups, and evidently a lot of those support groups are saying that mast cell activation syndrome, MCAS, a lot of people believe that you can never get better. And now I've seen people with that get better. And what's your take on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. That's one of the debates in both the Lyme groups and then especially in the MCAS groups, is that we can't recover from this. And I said, well, I did recover, and they have a number of reasons why that wasn't good enough for them, because they believe it's a chronic, never-ending, condition. Ironically, when I tell most people that I did a 10-day fast and recovered from anything, their first words are, "Oh, I could never do that." And I say, well, if that's what you believe, then you could never do that. I used to believe I could never do a fast too, but when I did it and felt the benefits of a 10-day fast, it was remarkable, and it reset my body and brain. So, I'm a steak and potatoes kind of guy, and I love food as much as anybody, and I grew up eating tons of food. So for me to even consider a fast was, very drastic back in my late 30s. But now it's amazing how my body can, communicate to me it's time to do a fast, and I can easily go into that mode. And for anybody who knows about fasting, knows that it produces autophagy, if I said that right, which is basically more mobilization of our stem cells. And that is the beautiful thing about the way our bodies are designed, is it knows where to mobilize those stem cells, and it knows where we need that healing energy. So our body does that on our own based on the environment, and fasting is the quickest thing we can do to reset that. So I had amazing benefits for, removing those MCAS symptoms, just starting with the fasting.
Yeah. So, and that's where, and so therefore, my take on that too is that, there are underlying issues that are contributing to the mast cell activation.
Absolutely.
And other things we're going to talk about today, and it comes back to, what we're eating and our immune system response to that. But it's what we're eating is very important on that. So those of you that are tuned in, we have this handout today at hyperbaric.plus at the resources page, and then also at prevailovercancer.com at the Learning Center. At the bottom of the Learning Center is today's handout. So you can go to there, you can download these. Also, these videos are going to be posted on the social media platforms. Matter of fact, I added my TikTok in today. Poor Ryan has got so many things going on. He's got 2 different sets of platforms going at the same time, so going into 4 to 6 different programs for each. So thank you, Ryan, for helping us with that. And so check it out. We'll have recordings of this also available. For me, people can go to YouTube, and then there's a live section, and there's the videos that are going to be posted there. So tune in. You can watch that. You can share that. If you know somebody has problems with mast cell activation syndrome, with dementia, with cancer, with autoimmune diseases. And so, matter of fact, I have a family history of 3 out of those 4 things, okay? And I myself have had some issues with some of those. So some of this is going to be experience that Tony and I have had, and then some of it's going to be actually science. And so that's what this information is science, and even references on the bottom of this. So one key factor that's related to all of this is there's a chemical that comes from protein called glutamate. And that glutamate is an amino acid that is a precursor to important things in our body. And it is also, it's an energy chemical for cancer cells. So the glutamine is converted over into glutamate, and glutamate is part of that energy ATP type process. Cancer cells love that. And then also on the diagram that I have on the back here at the very end, it also can go over into mast cell activation. So we've known for years that glutamate is an irritant. And matter of fact, I was sharing a story about I went to a Chinese restaurant once and had the worst headache I've ever had in my life. I waited a few weeks later, and yes, I did do it again. It tasted good. And so, but I wanted to try it again. Sure enough, I got a headache. Not as bad that time. I got another headache. So they were using I knew at the time, this is a long time ago. This is in the 70s. I assume they're using MSG, in their foods. It could have been other things too. It could have been histamine. Because when I do eat foods like that, I like to eat different foods and not just the steak, okay? I'm going for the octopus and the squid and other things too. So, because that's not normal here in Oklahoma.
Right.
So I want to go for those things. But also some of those things are also the items that have been sitting around the longest, and they're going to have the highest amount of histamine. So those foods are, can be a major problem. So, but glutamate can actually activate that mast cell that makes the histamine and release that histamine from it. So there's a feedback loop there. Now, glutamate also is a precursor to a very interesting, primarily an anti-cancer type chemical. Actually, relaxing. I didn't mean to say anti-cancer, but it is. Well, there's some research going on too. So that's why I said that. There's a new research article about GABA and brain cancer. But if we can shut down that conversion, so glutamine turns into glutamate. Glutamate turns into GABA, G-A-B-A. GABA is the neurotransmitter that is calming and relaxing. And there's other things that we can do to help with that process. And actually, vitamin B6 is necessary to help convert that glutamate into GABA. We've known, once again, actually forever, since the 1980s, I was started learning about this, 1980s, about vitamin B6 can help a person to feel more calm and relaxed or focused, and help out with depression and anxiety and many things like that. So vitamin B6 is used in several different processes in neurotransmitters throughout the body, not just the brain. But that goes back and forth. So GABA can also turn into glutamate. And so there actually is a glioblastoma study where they're looking at coming up with ways to block the GABA, keep it from turning back over into glutamate. And so that's why I let that kind of like slip, because that's a new article coming out. And then also glutamate is also a precursor to glutathione. And glutathione is the ultimate antioxidant in our body that repairs cells in the body. But cancer cells can do that same process. And if cancer cells are increasing the glutathione, that means that they're going to become more resistant to chemotherapy and radiation and some treatments. So therefore, we want to be careful about that process. And there's some nutrients like cysteine, which is also another amino acid that helps convert the glutamate into the glutathione. So, matter of fact, actually, genetically, I benefit from taking NAC to help me to make my glutathione. I need to do that. And so, but with the genetic test, I use 3X4 genetics to test for that, and I learned that. So, actually in this case, the NAC is helping to lower that irritating glutamate. So it's kind of weird, but NAC is also, for me, as a kind of like a prevention type thing, it lowers my risk of cancers. So, which is my family history, along with some other health challenges too. So I just want to kind of give you a little bit of a background on that, but glutamate is going to be the main focus that we're going to be talking about today.
So, Keith, I got a question about
Yes.
that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting as we look at this diagram that glutamate plays a role in GABA and glutathione and then also in mast cell activation.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that's causing either a positive response that benefits us or something that's triggering symptoms like mast cell where our body starts going haywire?
How's it going up into one of these three and maybe even more different pathways?
Yeah, and why are we getting a positive response with some and a negative response with others?
And there's underlying issues along the lines of, and you mentioned Lyme. So Lyme is, creating maybe even some histamine because our body's reacting to that to a certain extent. Inflammation, and so there's a kind of like underlying and or food challenges that are priming our system. And priming means it kind of loads up the histamine, so we're kind of like this high level anyway. And so now whenever we eat another food or this kind of adds, and it does go over, and all of us is going to have some of these issues. It's going to happen for all of us, okay?
Right.
These processes are not just like, oh, that person has that particular issue and they only make that. No, all of us make all of these chemicals, but certain underlying issues going on, maybe they're lacking diamine oxidase, a histamine enzyme in the gut. And so there are supplements that help with that to digest that histamine. And so now the histamine is not priming the system so that when the glutamate does happen to do that, it's not becoming a problem. So I venture to think that's probably what is kind of going on. Mm-hmm. So the underlying things about what we eat, and maybe even some supplements or medications or anything, could be a primer. And so primer could even be seasonal allergies and or whatever foods, and definitely any type of an allergen, whatever that could be. And certain histamine foods, I think, also are like priming that and getting the histamine high in the system, so it's just ready to go.
Yeah, I just want to say, kind of second that. It definitely, for me, it tied into foods. What I realized, I had a very clean diet, but I was not balanced because I was eating way too many high histamine foods. So eventually it just, it took a toll on my body, and I felt the circumstances. But one of the things that I talk to folks about, it's about balance. Sometimes we eat too much of one thing thinking it's a good thing, and at some point our body's going to go, that's enough, if you're not balanced here in the diet. So clean foods is one part of it, but balancing out what we're putting in our bodies, I think, also plays a role in what we see here.
Definitely. And so, this time of year, my garden is coming on, and I have, actually, I'm not having tomato plants yet. I mean, no tomatoes yet. But the one food I notice a problem with is eating a lot of tomatoes. And when I start eating at least one tomato every day, sometimes more, sometimes lunch and dinner, okay, that's when I start noticing a little bit more achiness going on. And so there's a couple of different, actually, types of chemicals in the tomatoes that can cause that problem. And but that's kind of one of the signs of, okay, well, it's time to cut back. But once again, I actually eat so clean that I can feel that. There was a time when I ate junk all the time, I had no idea what was creating a problem, what wasn't, because I didn't feel good.
I can relate to all of that.
And didn't feel good. And so but now, and so one of the main takeaways today is simple foods. Cooking at home, prepping at home. Anytime we go out to eat, that creates another problem. There's a lot of chemicals involved in that, in those foods. And who knows how long that's been sitting out. And I can think of like a salad bar situation, those foods sitting out for a long period of time, and or even sprayed with things to keep it from turning brown or whatever. Once again, just a lot of chemicals. So got to keep it simple. So last night, we had actually steak, and corn on the cob. It's kind of starchy, yes, but this is the season, and so I'm going to eat that occasionally, and a salad. And the salad had olive oil and balsamic vinegar and salt and pepper. That's it. Salt. And we did put some herbal spices, on the steak to decrease the charring and chemical carcinogens that can happen from that. And so, but simple, and that is very important to do. So simple foods, be careful about long-term storage. Things sitting in the refrigerator for long-term can have a high amount of histamine in them.
That's right.
On that. So, okay, so I'll talk about how glutamine is actually used for many different things. So I'm going to kind of skip over a lot on this handout. By the way, submit your questions. And so about mast cell activation, autoimmune disease, cancer, Lyme's disease. I don't have much. Although I admit I probably have, most of us do probably have some Lyme in our body, okay? And so most of us do. But so long as I'm doing things the right way, I don't feel that. I can feel that when I don't eat right. And for me, it's actually the trigger is like high amounts of carbohydrates, sugars, like dessert. Let me tell you, dessert, I'm going to feel it. I'm going to have a burning, achy sensation somewhere in my body after eating that. And so even a high amount of bread can create that problem. So I limit those to rare occasions now, with that. Okay, so glutamate does prime the mast cell to start releasing histamine. So that is part of the issue. Now, to help keep that from becoming a problem, we can support that transition by helping the glutamate go into the calming GABA. So, matter of fact, histamine, a common symptom of histamine, I can think of two offhand: anxiety and attention deficit.
Absolutely.
Okay, because that's an irritant. That glutamate is going, that histamine is going, and we've known for a long time. And so I couldn't think of my grandchildren when they were children. They're adults now, but I remember sometimes they could eat certain foods. I mean, they were just crazy after that, and probably due to a histamine, type response, and or glutamate. That's a neurotoxin, neurostimulant, type issue. Matter of fact, there's some theories that glutamate may be a major factor for dementias. Just a breakdown of the brain, the nerve cells in the body. There's other health issues. Autoimmune. We think of like MS. Is also an autoimmune issue. It seems like that's attacking the myelin sheath in the nervous system. And so, but it still may be related back to this. It's a combination of things. It's not an easy answer, but seek some help and some practitioners to help you deal with this. So, so if the histamine's high, so now it's going to create more inflammation. That's going to add to more problems, including the autoimmune problem. And so, glutamate is a stimulant for autoimmune system attacking. So there's a neurotransmitter immune type reaction that's going to happen and contribute to that. Primarily it's caused by the inflammation. So it's the same type of thing. Like genetically, I have an issue that I inherited from both my parents to make a high amount of interleukin-6, IL-6. That IL-6 is pain, okay? Pain. That IL-6 chemical is also a stimulant to most cancers. And so it is also made when we have autoimmune diseases and we have a health problem and inflammation in the body, it's going to make IL-6. That primes the system. So all this stuff is interrelated, with that. So glutamate is also a factor for autoimmune inflammation often. And then, this mast cell is directly related to autoimmune, reactions for the same reason. There's this feedback mechanism, going on. So, matter of fact, if you have a question, once again, if you have a question, submit that. Ryan's going to get that back to us in about 10 minutes, and then we'll have a short Q&A period on that. So what were the foods that you noticed that you were having a major problem with specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question, because one I didn't mention was fermented foods, because I'm very into gut health, and I've done a lot to address gut health constantly, and I feel like that's like a constant moving marker is how do we keep raising gut health. I ate a lot of fermented foods, and then I realized that fermented foods were also high in histamines. Like he said, the longer something sits or the longer something cooks, the more the histamines are raised. So while I thought I was doing something great for my gut, all of a sudden my body started having a histamine response. So going back to what I said, that's why it's so important to have balance and constantly be addressing what could be causing triggers with food. But fermented foods was one that I was definitely having a strong reaction to. Another, like you mentioned, tomatoes. There's a group of foods called nightshades. Most people have never heard of them, but it's basically peppers, tomatoes, eggplant. Any kind of pepper is a nightshade, and that is a very common inflammatory food. And if you react to one, there's a good chance you're going to react to several. Right. And then the longer you cook it or the more you ferment it, the more histamine, so the more apt we are to react to it. But I love eggplant if it's cooked right. And what I discovered is in the Mediterranean restaurants, which I believe a Mediterranean diet is a great example of an anti-inflammatory, diet. But they eat a lot of, I forget the name of the dish, but it's basically eggplant like hummus where it's a dip. And that was a major reaction for me, even though I loved the taste, loved eating it, because it was cooked, and then, the way that they make it into a dip and then store it, those histamines are raised. So even though it tasted amazing and it should be a healthy food, it was having a major histamine response to me. So I caution folks all the time about nightshades. Be very careful with any nightshades, because it's pretty easy to remove and feel the benefit quickly. But cooked tomatoes and stored eggplant or fermented foods were three of the foods that I reacted to the most.
One of one of the ones I didn't know until recently, although I have a histamine food list also, I give them my clients too. So, and I don't know if this was on there, but when I was researching this topic today, preparing this handout, that's available at hyperbaric.plus and at Prevail Over Cancer. At hyperbaric.plus at the resources, and at Prevail Over Cancer at the Learning Center. for the download, but is bone broth. Also, is another one of those. Matter of fact, bone broth that's cooked long term. Same thing with tomatoes. It's like something about cooking it longer term. The thicker the tomato sauce, type of thing, maybe the greater the concern with that.
Absolutely.
So, and then how many of you like me, love salsa? And so that's one of those. I mean, it's got the peppers, it's got the tomatoes, it's been sitting on the shelf forever. And so that is just a part of that picture.
One of the interesting things that I found, Keith, to your point, is I love Mexican food, grew up eating it all the time. And most Mexican restaurants I go eat at, I have a major response to. What I discovered is I could go eat at a taco truck and I didn't have that same response. And it's because at a taco truck, they have to cook everything pretty much daily. Right. They're making new salsa daily. Whereas a Mexican restaurant, they're making huge tubs of it, or they're buying it pre-made from the corporate.
Big truck.
Exactly. And they're storing it for a long term. So it was amazing to me that I thought Mexican food was a no-no, but I can go eat at a taco truck and I can enjoy Mexican food without having a flare-up. So it has everything to do with what we're talking about, where we're raising the histamine response. And even if we don't have mast cell activation syndrome, we can often have a histamine response to foods, and most folks are just not even looking at that. So
that's right.
It is important.
Exactly. Matter of fact, I love taco trucks.
Right.
There's one I love. Matter of fact, I'll go up there and he knows what I'm getting. So he knows me. Doesn't know my name, but
I've got a couple that know exactly what I like to order. So I know
love
that.
the taco trucks. I love supporting the small business and things like that. So it's really great. But also, and we talk about this concern about glutamate, but remember, glutamate does turn into GABA, and GABA is a calming chemical. But we have to have vitamin B6 and maybe even magnesium along that line to help that to work, to convert that over into that calming chemical. So, but that is one of those ways. So a little thing to help out with the histamine level responsible for all of this type of reaction. And part of that is also, oh, by the way, I'm going to make another statement before I get into this because I'm going to talk about supplements. So I have to have a disclaimer. So due to FDA requirements and FTC, I have to say this, but supplements are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. The FDA has not evaluated it for that. And this information is for education purposes only. Paul, are you proud of me? Throwing that in. He always prompts me at the beginning. I almost forgot to say that because we're going to talk about a little bit about supplements here. And so, Paul, we're honoring you on that. So, Paul will be back with us next week, I'm sure. But but this is for education purposes. So, check with a healthcare practitioner before making changes to your healthcare program. So, take this information, evaluate it, and use it appropriately. So I'll go on. So natural antihistamine type things, you mentioned it, and we've talked about how to pronounce this ourselves, but I pronounce it quercetin. How do you pronounce it?
And I say quercetin, which is probably my Brazilian upgrowing.
My Okie accent. My Okie accent. Between the two of us, well, anyway,
it's tomato, quercetin, quercetin.
But that product is amazing, and so that's part of actually several different pathways on anti-cancer effects. And so it reduces histamine. Histamine is a driver of cancer. So, but it helps to lower histamine levels. It is a natural antihistamine, a natural anti-inflammatory. So it's one of my favorite things, and so I do consume it, and take those pills before I have, or at the beginning of most of my meals. I don't always do that, but most of the time. I'm going to have that product along with your curcumin, anti-inflammatory type item. So let's see here, cancer connection. So the glutamate, can be, glutamine, glutamic acids is turned into glutamine. Glutamine is turned into glutamate. Glutamate is a chemical that cancer cells love. And so there's a lot of discussion about that. We also have to have this chemical, though. We have to have it. We don't want to shut it down. Matter of fact, the prescription drug that some practitioners are trying to shut down the glutamate aspect of cancer is actually a very dangerous drug. And if we shut that down, the person might not live. So we have to have these things. We have to help it channel into the right responses and or kind of get rid of the underlying histamine issues that could be going on. So, in applying this to what I call the Prevail protocol, Prevail. So we have to pinpoint our biology. So we have to, do some testing to figure out what's going on. You can do histamine levels. There is a test for the MCAS. I'm not an expert in that, but there is a test for that you can do to see if that is an issue. You can also test for diamine oxidase with a gut test and find out if you need to be taking that supplement to help you digest histamine. That could be in foods. That is a histamine an antihistamine that our body makes, that some of us lose the ability to take care of that. So some of you that have a MCAS that is like going on forever and you can't figure it out, there's a possibility that lacking DAO, diamine oxidase, may be a contributing cause to that. So check that out. There are supplements with that in there. Root your nutrition. We got to make the right nutrition choices, and keep it simple. Prepare your foods at home. Choose a restaurant and or choose the foods differently. So I get a salad at a restaurant. I'm not going with their pre-mixed salad dressing. Mm-hmm. I'm going with olive oil and vinegar and salt and pepper. And I may even add a few little pepper flakes on it. So I may do that, but I'm keeping it simple. And you don't have to always go with what the restaurant is offering. Change that. And then also elevate our defenses. So, our body has the ability to correct the system, or rather what's going on, if we're making those right choices. And then vitalize through movement. So physical activity is very important. It's an anti-stressor. I'll throw in this would be, we've got one more step. I'll throw that in, the fasting in a second. But we have to be exercising and moving. That's a de-stressor. People with cancer that exercise on a regular basis, intentional exercise, walking's not quite good enough. It's okay, but if it's going to be more resistance, have a 35-40% reduced risk of dying from their cancer. So movement is extremely important. Align your whole life, and so I'm going to throw in the, just everything we're talking about today, along with some fasting. And so that's actually when I first started, making changes. It was fasting. It was intermittent fasting. Instead of having the cereal and milk every day, mm-hmm. I cut that out so I could do some short-term fasting and fast until lunch for religious purposes. That's when I started feeling better. Mm-hmm. Okay, so combination of things. I was going in, not quite into autophagy at that point, but I was able to, get rid of those offending foods that were priming my system to create problems. So we have to integrate every system, just everything we're doing, and then live with purpose. We have to have a goal and a purpose in our life. And actually, the most rewarding thing is actually helping people. That's what you're doing, and that's what I'm doing. And it's so rewarding to do that. And you don't have to do this channel type of thing, social media, but my wife, her ministry is actually helping widows at church and taking them on errands and seeing the doctor. Matter of fact, she's taking a person today to see an eye doctor or an iron infusion. I don't know what it is, but it's like her schedule, her calendar is full, helping half a dozen ladies, and so, but that's her mission and that's her purpose. That gives us a reason to get going and to serve other people. Some of you, it's going to be your family, your children, whatever, but we have to have that ready to go. Have to have that purpose in our life. So we're going to have a call for questions, so submit your questions. Ryan's going to print those off in a couple of minutes. So where does glutamate kind of concentrate? So glutamate has a tendency to concentrate in MSG. And so that magic recipe at these fast food restaurants, MSG, mm-hmm. It's a tenderizer. And actually, we have taste receptors that they've named after that love that MSG. It's kind of salty, but it's in chips. There's all kinds of things. So part of that flavoring mix that you see. So, but it's often in foods. And so if you have a problem and you notice that your nose is running, or watery, itchy nose or eyes, that could be one of those signs, of a histamine, thing going up high. So, but it can be in MSG, hydrolyzed or processed foods and proteins and meats that have been sitting for too long. So that fish market where that fish has been sitting there for a few days, that could be a problem in that. And then natural flavors, often they're going to have that added into it, or things like that that could be irritants. So that term, natural flavors, we've mentioned that almost every time we meet here. That is a box of more than 100 different things that aren't necessarily natural.
Right.
It's the law that allows that. So long aged and fermented foods. So we're talking about cheeses can be a problem. Did you ever find cheese as an issue for you?
Certain cheeses,
Okay.
mass processed cheeses, definitely.
Okay.
If I ate a raw small batch cheese, it didn't
Didn't raise much
trigger me
problem.
at all.
Okay.
So
Okay. And then soy and fish sauces. So soy sauce sitting on that counter for months, and in the jug back in the back, and so those types of sauces can be a problem. And even though we may like those tastes, but that has a trigger for some of us. So we've got to be very
Absolutely.
careful about that. Okay, so what supports a healthy balance? Whole food, single ingredient. So if you have more than 2 or 3 ingredients on that list, on that food, that's a problem. My wife doesn't like going to the store with me because I'm reading those labels, okay? And I take too long because I'm stopping all the time and taking pictures and such. And then magnesium-rich plants. So magnesium helps with that conversion of many different brain chemicals into calming type chemicals, but like leafy greens and seeds, and your own garden produce. Once again, try to keep it simple. Adequate vitamin B6. So B6 is one of those supplements that may have an effect, and usually a person feels it within a day or two. And then sometimes you have to stop it and then add it back in, kind of experiment with it or not. But that's going to be very important. They help to convert that glutamate into the calming GABA. And we got lists. Okay, got questions? Good. And then let's see. And then the appropriate amounts of protein. We have to have that protein all the time to make all of the amino acids in the body in appropriate quantities. I use the palm rule to help with that. So the goal is to kind of calm things down so that we don't have as much problem. Okay, so we got questions. And so let's see. Hello from Massachusetts. Is glutamine safe, or will it increase cancer tumors? Well, yeah, glutamine, I'll make sure I'm reading that right. Okay, glutamine is the amino acid that we have to have. It does repair many different parts of the body. I mean, all kinds of parts of the body, muscles and the gut, for example. But glutamine can be converted by cancer cells into glutamate, and that is an energy thing that cancer cells love. So that's the advantage about doing fasting, going back to the fasting thing. And so I'm a big fan of doing intermittent fasting, eating in a 6 or 8 hour window every day, and then doing a minimum of a 3-day fast, and maybe longer, but a 3-day fast. Our body is made for fasting.
absolutely.
And so many health conditions, I've seen people with diabetes get much better by doing a 1 week of fasting. And so fasting helps out with that. But then we still have to have these chemicals. And so cancer cells, I can't say that glutamine causes cancer, but cancer cells will use it. It's kind of like sugar. I can't say sugar directly causes cancer, but cancer cells love that sugar and the glutamine for energy. So if we can go without some of that for a while, the cancer cells now are, you think you're hungry, the cancer cells are starving. And the goal is for them to starve, not grow, and maybe even die. So we can do things to help out with that. And fasting is part of it. I will also often use the oncoadjuvant supplements, including the quercetin and berberine and curcumin and EGCG, about 15 to 30 minutes before eating to calm all of this down. the histamine and the glutamine issue. So that's one of my favorite little tactics. Okay, so can you take NAC daily? Yes, that is on the list. And so, actually you can. One caution is if there's one supplement that I see regularly that could decrease the effectiveness of some chemotherapy drugs, it's NAC. So NAC is an antioxidant that repairs cells, and it can repair tumors. The tumors can use NAC to increase the glutathione levels. And so there's thousands of studies showing that. So during radiation and during chemotherapy, timing is important. So not during those time periods. But yes, actually, I do take NAC on a regular basis. And actually, it helps me with some of my attention deficit and OCD type tendencies, so that I'm not wanting to keep doing things over and over again. And so yes, there are other benefits to that. So I can't say that you can take it because I haven't evaluated your situation, but NAC can be taken regularly. It also has a great effect it's an expectorant that thins out lung congestion, and it helps protect the brain. Just kind of a general statement. So once again, it helps lower that glutamate, irritant chemical. Okay, so any insight on peptides that help with dementia?
I think that's Daventide, if I'm pronouncing that
okay,
right.
Daventide. Okay, I'm not familiar with Daventide, and I'm not an expert in peptides. I do use some peptides with some of my clients, but I'm not familiar with that for dementia. But I would imagine there is one that's actually derived from milk. I'm drawing a blank on what that is, but they've actually seen some human studies and mice studies in that, and actually it's been around for 20 years.
I've got something to share on that too. We have a number of folks that are doing neurofeedback here with what we call new mind neurofeedback. And I've been able to I love what Keith says about assess, don't guess. Mm-hmm. We've been able to do that with the neurofeedback assessment that we call brain mapping. We did a study because we have a number of people in here that are interested or doing research on peptides, myself included. In fact, I used peptides and got great relief for some of the cognitive issues that I was going through. I felt an amazing synergistic benefit with the peptides in the hyperbaric chamber. But specifically, we started one cycle for someone that was using cerebroricin, if I'm pronouncing that right, and CMAX together. They were using that combo. And so what we did is we did a brain mapping, and then after that 20-day cycle, we did another brain mapping just to see if we moved the needle with those peptides, because we didn't make any other changing. And the results were actually quite amazing. We saw a 40% increase in 20 days using those peptides based on the brain mapping. So if anybody wants more information or research or education on peptides, you can reach out to me directly. I've got a number of folks that are really trying to tackle that and step into that. But yes, I do believe peptides can help rewire the brain to offset some of those symptoms that are related to dementia.
Okay, yeah. So how do they get in contact with you?
You can get in contact with me here just by calling Hyperbarics Plus directly. You can email me, tony@hyperbaric.plus. Okay. If you call up here, somebody's happy to give you my cell phone if you need to reach me directly. Or you can get on the website and book a time with me. I've got slots available to where if people want to get on the app or the website, they can book a time directly with me to talk about that.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.
Good question.
Okay. Is it okay to eat chicken for cancer? And so, yes, probably. Once again, I haven't evaluated your particular situation, on that, but it depends on the source of the chicken, the quality, and things like that. So, yes, it definitely can be. I think variety is important. I don't like to just say, yep, eat chicken every day. Matter of fact, that's one of the more common things I see probably once a week, where a person's eating the exact same food or foods every single day. That increases the odds of having a sensitivity allergy problem to a food. So anyway, yes, chicken is typically okay for cancer, yes. And so hi, Gigi, thank you, hi, thank you. burger, one thing, tomato sauce, not anything made with tomato paste next level. Yes. So yeah. So another question, a statement actually is about the more process that tomato thing, like a slice of tomato. Yeah, that's right. It's not very much, but when you cook that tomato down, you cook that, evaporate that, and now it's more concentrated. And so that's where you go from a slice of a raw tomato, which actually does have lectins. I'm not too concerned about lectins actually, but it's still it is a factor. Some people might have some inflammation from that lectin, but those lectins also have anti-cancer actions. But but the more processed that is and more concentrated, like this person is saying, like you go into a tomato sauce is going to be more of a concern than a slice of a tomato. Yes, part of it is because it's going to be more concentrated, and then it's sitting on the shelf for a longer period of time. Months, type of thing versus that fresh tomato. Okay, so. Okay. So where do you go to get testing to find out your sensitivities? From a traditional standpoint, you can do, blood tests for allergies, IgE type blood tests. There's also food sensitivities by, let's see, Cell Science Systems, I believe it is. And they can actually test you for a sensitivity. They actually look at your white blood cells to see how your white blood cells respond to many different foods. And then what do you do for that?
Yeah, that's a great question because all testing never helped me. They could never find anything wrong with me based on lab test. So for me, the testing has always been to start off by fasting, whether it's intermittent fasting, 3-day fast, 10-day fast. I've gotten benefit from all of them, but then using the principles of an elimination diet, I slowly add things in one by one by one. And that's the only way I've ever been able to assess what is triggers for me. And it's been ever changing as I've gone through the years. Things I used to be able to eat, I realized I could no longer eat or temporarily not eat. So, at some point I reassess too. I'll start the process all over again. It's like, I know this is normally a trigger, but let's see now. And it may not be any longer, as our bodies adapt and get balanced out. I always tell folks, once you get healthy, there's certain foods you can add back in. So don't think this is a permanent thing you have to eliminate. But the reality is, at some point, you just have to eliminate everything and add things in slowly, one by one by one, to assess when testing doesn't help you.
Right, exactly. So, yes, that is correct. Thank you, Tony. So,
You bet.
And then one more question. It's almost at the hour. Let's see. What do you do about alopecia hair loss? So, what do you do about alopecia hair loss, in which there's different types of alopecia hair loss, but if it's alopecia totalis, that means throughout the whole body, the immune system is attacking the hair follicle. It's an autoimmune disease. And so, once again, you have to actually get to the source of the problem. And autoimmune, and so everything we talked about today could be a factor for that. And so they will often use cortisone to try to calm the immune system down, to keep the immune system from attacking those follicles. So for some people, they can have the autoimmune attack could be the hair follicle, and then other people, it could be a joint. And other people, it could be their skin. So everybody is different on that. And some people, it could be even their blood vessels, a vasculitis type issue. So there's still some more questions, and we'll get to those later. I'll try to find those and respond to those. So we're on the hour, so it's time for another hyperbaric session to start. So we're going to sign off, and be sure and go to hyperbaric.plus resources page and Prevail Over Cancer, the Learning Center, to download this guide, and then also check out the recordings and share that with somebody that you know may be suffering with autoimmune disease, mast cell activation syndrome, cancer. What else did we mention? Oh, attention deficit. So, and dementias even. So irritating chemicals, can happen, can start damaging any part of our body. So thank you for tuning in. Tony, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.